members who have paid their debts to society, and in fact have served their time in jail, and when they're out, they become productive or want to become productive citizens. They get out, they get jobs, they pay taxes, but the one thing that they're not afforded is the liberty to go into a voting booth and vote for someone to represent their community, no matter if it's on the federal level, the state level, the county level, or the local level. If they've paid their debt to society by being incarcerated and now are out in the streets trying to live like productive citizens, they should have their rights restored to at least go into a voting booth to elect and select members to represent their needs and their causes that they believe in. What was alarming to me, and I'm not going to take you back years and years ago, but I'm going to go to 2017. 2017, there were 15,617 people on parole. In 2017, there were 60,118 people on probation. In 2018, there were 15,811 people on parole. In 2018, there were 56,950 people on probation. And just this year alone, 2019, there are 15,000 people, 585, who are on parole. And there are 65,000, that number has grown, 65,026 people on probation. That's just 3 years. We're not counting what will happen next year, and we were not counting anything prior to 2017. If those numbers are not alarming to you, let me just tell you that those are human beings who are not afforded the liberty and the right to go in and to elect. It may be a Democrat they may want to support. It may be a Republican that they may want to support. It may be an independent that they want to support. They may not want to even participate and vote for a yes or no question that may be on a referendum. But these people, those thousands of people that I just mentioned to you, they paid their debt to society by being incarcerated and out in the streets and living like human beings. They cannot participate in who they elect. Is that real social justice? No. Real social justice is allow someone to at least have the right to go into a voting booth to select who they would like to represent their communities. Right now, it is strict. And a lot of them, unfortunately, they look like me. They look like Shavonda. They look like Assemblyman Sher. They look like Assemblyman Bertuccelli. They look like Assemblyman Nancy Munoz. They look like us. But because of some mistake or something that had happened, they paid their debt. It's done. They served their time in jail, incarcerated. And now they're out, trying to make a life better for themselves. But we have limited their ability to participate in why we are all in the seats that we represent here today. So what this bill does today, it's just restore their right, gives them an opportunity to participate in a process that we all would love to participate in. So this is what this bill does. I had a whole bunch of talking points, but I think the Assemblywoman, and I think most of you, and I think all of you, really understand that if you really want to talk about social justice and you want to give somebody the ability to participate, give them the right to vote. Give them their ability back. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Thank you, Assemblyman. Thank you. We have a number of people that have signed up to testify. Because of the hour of the day, we may trim some of the testimonies we've got. Let me first call Matt Dragon. Matt here. Matt, please come on up. How about Lauren Brown? Strumpfeld? Lauren, please come on up. How about Liz Lang? Liz, are you here? Liz, come on up. Thank you. We only have 3 seats, but we'll go 3 at a time. Now, one of the things that happens to and helps this committee is that's what we're looking for, the testimony that helps. Repetitive doesn't help us. We may appear tense. Sometimes we may, things may happen that way, but we actually get it. So we're going to start first of all. Who do I call first? Thank you. I'm sorry. Welcome to you. Your name, please, for the record. We're going to start you at 3 minutes, and we'll go from there.
My name is Matt Dragon. Good afternoon. My name is Matt Dragon from Les Arge. I want to thank the committee for considering this bill concerning the fundamental right to vote. I believe everyone should have the right to vote. Crying and trying to get her to stop. After I ran out the back door to my best friend's house, my friend's first thing the next morning, she called Child Protective Services. I remember in the morning standing there on the sidewalk between a social worker, the police, and my mom. They asked if I wanted to stay with my mom. I told them no, so I went away. My first taste of any kind of institution, and to this day, probably the worst place I have ever been in. After 2 years of foster care, I started to miss my brother and even my mother, and started to visit them on weekends. My resolve finally faded at the age of 13, I returned to my mom. After a few good months, things soured. My mother, fearing jail, moved us to Camden, New Jersey. I got my first taste of Judy at 15 for missing school. I didn't mind it there, it was actually fun. We couldn't afford summer camps or vacations, so it was kind of a break. I never thought it would lead to me getting sent to places like Jamesburg or Yardville down the line. But that is the folly of youth. These trips have led me to a life behind bars, one in which I will finally be free soon. I am a changed man from when I entered the system. Getting back the right to vote is the next step in this process. It would mean a lot for me to vote for someone I see as a benefit to our community. I have never been able to vote, and unless the right to vote is restored, I will never get to. But I am somebody. If my vote doesn't count, then I don't count. Having the right to vote is having a right to self-determination, and without that one right, my existence is moot. Seeing how proud my children were when voting for the first time made me feel left out and ashamed that I forfeited my right to vote. I want to make my kids proud. I want to vote for people who care about my community and will work for the whole community. I will not allow my life's beginning to dictate my life's ending. I feel like a whole person now, and that I was made for something greater in life. One of the next steps is being able to vote in it.
I need you to summarize.
Okay. The next step is getting a voice back and making myself whole. Thank you.
Well, now I'm confused. You checked the post of this bill. Are you in favor or opposed?
That was a clerical error.
Okay. We're going to change that for you.
Thank you.
I guess since you're in favor of it at this point. Who did I call next? I'm sorry. And your name, please, for the record.
My name is Lauren Brown-Stromhaus, and I also checked the post. I just wanted to clarify that I'm opposed to the bill as it is currently constructed because I think it should be expanded to include currently incarcerated people. I'd like to speak to that point. I hold a PhD in American history, and I teach at Raritan Valley Community College, where for the last 6 years I've also taught in the New Jersey STEP, or Scholarship and Transformative Education in Prisons program. Students enrolled in NJ STEP are working towards an associate degree while currently incarcerated. While we teach, the program teaches students incarcerated across the state, my comments refer to my experience at Edna Mann Correctional Facility for Women and Mountain View Youth Correctional Facility, both located in Hardin County.
I'm sorry, if I may interrupt
Yes,
you.
please.
Because that discussion of being able to vote while incarcerated is being looked at in a separate standalone bill.
So may I speak to the persons formerly incarcerated?
Yeah, so that's what we're dealing with. People that are out that can't vote. Your comments there are talking.
My experiences inside, I think, particularly reflect a position. I'd like to speak again from my personal experience, because as a person who has been involved in politics and voted in every election since I was 18 years old, I find it an important exercise of my citizenship and my right. Knowing in particular that before I went inside to teach, I had never known a person who was incarcerated or just not known about. Perhaps they had not wanted to share that with me. So my experience inside in New Jersey has been the first encounters that I had with incarcerated people with their life stories and their experiences. And particularly what stood out for me was that the students that I've encountered through teaching inside have been of my almost 20-year career in higher education, particularly not just the most insightful, curious, and motivated students, that I have encountered, they in particular, okay, have shown me that I was really wrong in thinking that people inside were not really people, that they were paying for their crimes, and that once they left, that burden would be lifted. It is not. And as the Assemblywoman spoke so powerfully, this burden of being barred from the right to exercise the rights of citizenship is a legacy that we have carried through from the past in particular. So when disfranchisement first arose in the 1820s, it was a tool to diminish not just the voice, but the value of free black men and of women. In New Jersey, as some of you may be aware, women's who owned property could vote for a period of time before that was eliminated in the 19th century. So I would maintain then that allowing people on parole to vote in the state of New Jersey is not just something that should be done to restore the rights that have been removed from them, but that it also is a movement that would help to bring about a greater, it just would restore, I think about, I'm sorry, this is such an emotional topic for maybe for some people that
I do need to conclude, please.
Yeah, so I would just conclude that voting rights are not just about representation, which is important. It's not just about appropriation, which is important, how we know who we serve and represent our communities, but it's also about the value of citizenship and recognizing that people matter in the state of New Jersey. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. So you check the code, but you seem in favor.
So yes, as I stated, I believe that people currently incarcerated should be included, but I'm in favor of the bill if this is where it is today.
Please.
Yes, thank you. Also for the record, I'd also like to change that I also am in support of A5823, but the same as Dr. Braun-Schroenfeld, also believe that it should include folks who are incarcerated, but I understand we're not speaking to that today.
Yeah, we can't speak that today now. Now, you will now face a chance for two people speaking in front of you, so you have to say something different.
Sure. I'm going to say something short. Once again, my name is Liz.
Short's good too.
Sure. My name is Liz Glenn again, and I'm the Director of Organizing with New Jersey Citizen Action, and our organization does support this bill because we believe everyone should have the fundamental right to vote. Today, just the abbreviated, I want to do abbreviated version of I have some words from Sean Burrell, who is currently incarcerated. He has been incarcerated since the age of 14. And so he has been unable to vote because of a felony conviction he committed prior to his age of consent. He was waived up to the adult court, and prior to any criminal proceedings, a public defender convinced him to plead guilty to felony murder and allow himself to receive the maximum punishment allowed by law. And he thought it was the best decision for his family to move on. So this is someone who he was a waived child, still incarcerated individual. He has a perspective that he thinks should be allowed at the table when he is released from prison, and he believes that his voice should be part of the conversation, and he thinks incarcerated people have a unique perspective on the justice system, society, and the changes that can enhance the understanding of the needs of these neglected areas. He says he understands he may never be allowed to vote. It's hard to become involved in my community if I'm not allowed to vote because of a mistake I made at the age of 14. He sees the reality of social injustice, the areas that are not addressed, or if addressed, done so incorrectly. And he says, I know my experiences can affect positive change. Having a voice and being able to vote for candidates who reflect what is best for my community is not a privilege. It should be an undeniable American right, a human right.
Thank you. Well done. Well spoken. Thank you. Thanks, John. Stay for the second, Senator Michelle has a general question, Gary.
Why isn't
We are all human beings. Well, I can't speak. Yeah, well, this is his words. Could I speak, sir?
I'm not asking his words.
Why I agree with that? Sure. I think we're all humans, and even when you are incarcerated or you're on parole or probation, you should have a say in what's going on in your community. I do think it's funny that we include prisoners in our when we consider districts. We have prison gerrymandering in New Jersey, yet we don't give them the right to vote. And it's a shame that, especially that we should make sure we're giving them a right to vote on parole, probation, especially if they are contributing to society. working and they're living there in their community, they should have a right to say,
Follow up, if you will. Right, it seems to me the way this is being defined is, you're incarcerated, then you're on parole or probation. Is parole probation a part of the sentencing which brought the incarceration, or is it separate and distinct?
I believe it's being considered separate and distinct, especially in the purpose of this law, because we have carved out people in prison for this current bill.
So could one argue, or would it be logical to argue that the sentencing that one received for whatever crime was committed, one is incarcerated, one is on parole or probation, that that's one unified factor, and then voting would come after that? Am I being clear or not?
Well, I mean,
The
you guys,
question is, where is it truncated? Is it truncated with incarceration, or is it independent?
I think right now for voting rights, it is truncated, right? We treat people who are incarcerated one way, people who are parole, people on probation. If a 5823 were to pass, then we would say folks who are on parole and probation have that right back, but folks who are incarcerated don't.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you. Next group up, Anthony Dixon. Anthony, are you here? Yeah. Come on up, Anthony. We have you opposed, but looking for carve-outs. How about Ann, is it Hall? Dale? Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry to go listening. Come on up, please. How about Susan McDonald? Susan, are you here? I'm sorry. Susan, welcome back again. You can get come on up, please. All right, so the challenge, we continue because you have had 3 people speak in front of you, so looking for testimony that helps us, it's not repetitive. So, how about we start, Anthony, I'll call you first, sir, so your name for the record and welcome.
My name is Anthony Dixon.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you for the audience today. I want to speak on voting rights as we know. First, let me say in brief that I do not believe constitutional rights stop at the front door of a prison. And I believe that we are at a historic moment in our nation and in this state to turn the tide on what was first enacted to disenfranchise people that was emancipated from slavery. And even before that, black people was not allowed to vote unless they, even if they was free and not in slavery, unless they owned property or in our state. In fact, it does nothing toward individuals that are on parole. My job description is community engagement. I also am a director of another organization called When People Work that help people find employment. I find it ironic that people can work in our society and be taxed, but don't have representation. To answer the question further, I think that when we deal with this question, we're not only dealing with race, but we're dealing with a punitive culture that continue to cut people off from society. People cannot talk without their vote. In fact, we have uncitizenized people in our state. If you cannot vote, you're not a citizen. When people have their citizen rights given to them, then they are jumping for joy because they feel they can vote. We are taking people's citizenship away from them. I think that once we turn this tide, we'll be on a more moral ground and we'll be on an even keel. When we talk about another issue that I think is really related to this prison jury management, how people are on life sentence, but yet they are allowed to be voted in by proxy of they exist in a county, but yet they cannot have voting rights. I wrote down, and I'm going to summarize on this, I wrote down that I am opposed to a bill that does have carve-outs, that is not inclusive of all people. I would like to say that I was in prison for 32 years. The first time I voted was the first time I ever felt like I was part of the community.
Anthony, can I ask you to summarize, please?
Please give other people that experience.
Thank you. Well spoken. Okay, I call you next, I think. Citizens, you want to go? Okay. Now, we're going to, again, we're asking not to be repetitive as possible, but Anthony's story is very personal. So can you help this committee, or do I have you down as opposed at this time?
Yes, I'm speaking again, representing the Criminal Justice Reform Task Force. Ann and I are co-chairs of that task force for youth faith action. We come here today, we reluctantly oppose the bill because of the carve-out, and not including those who are currently incarcerated, as the original bill does. And we've been enthusiastically supporting that, and we know that several of you here are sponsors of that, as well as Assemblywoman Sumter. We have not reached this decision lightly. In fact, as people are coming to the table, I was waffling again. We, of course, support restoring the vote to those on parole and probation, absolutely, positively.
So.
That's a I know. But we have to oppose the bill because of the carve-out.
Well,
Here's
now,
the fear.
would you ask the members of this committee to vote against this bill? And not release it? That's what you're asking.
Can I say a few more words and then? Of course. For fiscal impact, I don't think we can sit here and make any prognostications about any big fiscal impact of having people vote, but I think we can say that whether they are currently on probation, never went to prison, whether they've been paroled and they're back in the community, certainly being able to engage civically in their communities and vote on things that are important to them can't but help lower recidivism. I would make the same argument that allowing people who are currently incarcerated to vote would serve the same purpose. It gives them something to hope for. It gives them a way to become civically engaged even while being removed from society.
As you conclude, I have to ask, do you want me to vote for this bill today or not?
So I'm Libra, I can never make up my mind.
It's okay.
Okay.
No. And you're okay to be torn. But-
I am torn. Let me say this, I was glad to hear reference to the 3, 4, 5, 6. We fear that if that remains only for incarcerated people later on, after we pass this bill, it becomes too easy for that to get lost on the pile.
You're asking me to vote against this bill.
I am asking you to vote against the bill.
Okay. Now, by the way, before we close this panel, so let me tell you the irony, Anthony, you could appreciate this. This year, across the state, in this election, less than 26% of people who have the right to vote voted. You're here arguing for people to get a chance to vote, who want to vote, and we can't get people who are allowed to vote to vote. What about it?
What about
It's ironic. Okay, Susan, you're next. So are you asking us to vote for the bill or against the bill? It's not a complicated question. Because we only have one choice. Yes. Yeah. Anthony, can you turn the mic on? Anthony, can you turn the mic on? And I apologize for the informality of first name, but I'm bad with last name, so please. Thank you, Susan.
Yes, I'm Susan.
And I'm sorry, I want you, Susan. Yes, I can hear you, and we'd like to have you work within 2-minute frame. I have to move down so you can accommodate everyone.
Okay, I was going to talk more about values, and it's important that everyone has rights for the right to vote, and especially about the parent work and dignity of every person. Historically, in practice, we've been slow and as a nation on these things. The loss of voting rights is not part of the sentence imposed by the judge. It's part of the law that since 1844 is driven by working class. We should allow everyone, including those currently incarcerated, to retain the right to vote, rather than to chip away at the edges of the 1844 law, while leaving the core of that law intact. Further increasing racial and economic disparities inherent in our electorate. I have the privilege of being here as a registered voter in this nation, and I'm speaking for my fellow citizens in New Jersey that do not have those same privileges. And this is not what democracy should look like. Every citizen in New Jersey should have the opportunity to make their own voices heard in the political process. And if I have time, I have some words from the Australia.
Yeah, you take another minute.
incarcerated since the age of 19. My community's voice has been suppressed for so many years that young people do not believe their voice will be heard, much less valued by those in government. So many generations before us have been silenced through suppressive laws. It is easy to believe our voice will not count. We need more. We are not valued as equals in this country. With this belief, I've never been a registered voter. From today, unlike in my youth, I understand the value of my vote. I understand the generational disconnection of African Americans from the electorate. The electorate was designed to disconnect African Americans from the power of the franchise. This loss has prevented me from being a difference maker in my community and denies me the ability to lead by example for my children. I've tried to express the vote's importance to my children, expressing how everyone's vote matters. However, without being able to exercise the franchise myself, there's a place for myself. If my vote were restored today, I would be extremely happy. It would miss the voices of generations of oppressed, crying out from America's nightmare to finally be part of the American dream.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now, ladies, by the way, as you read, am I voting for this or not?
Well, yes, and I unfortunately, I will stay with the post.
Already not. Okay, is Richard Smith here? I know Richard was here earlier, he's the president of the state NSLACP. Is Richard still here, my son?
I'm sorry?
Is Richard Smith here?
He's at a press conference. He's on his way back from the press conference.
I want to make sure we get him. How about, last name is Oakley, I'm sorry. Please, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm on.
Yeah, please, I'm like, come on, thank you. I was having trouble transferring, please come forward. How about Reverend Yerb Mark? Reverend, come forward, thank you. How about Christopher Keith? Christopher, come on up, Christopher. We only have 3 chairs. I thought we have you all in favor of the bill. Does that sound right? The last group confused me. Opposed voted in favor of it, very confused. The other ladies told me to vote for. Where are my ladies? And it's going back. Reverend. Be careful not to fall. If not, the building won't fall. Run through the short. Folks, if I can ask your indulgence, we have a lot of people want to testify, so you're the first group testifying in favor of. I'm going to ask you to stay about 2.5 minutes if you can. And if there's questions, there'll be questions. Because we want to vote on this before the day is out. We have a lot of people involved. So I call you first. Please, your name for the record and welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Armani Oakley. I'm the legislative director for Working Families in New Jersey. Is it on? Right?
Yes.
Great, it's on.
That's it.
There we go.
There you go.
We're good now? Okay.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Armani Oakley. I'm the legislative director for Working Families in New Jersey. And before I lend my voice to Latonia Bellamy, I'd just like to say that we need to not continue to repeat that history that this country has already gone through. Stripping people of their right to vote is the same as relegating them to second-class citizens, and Black and brown folks, which we know our criminal justice system is overfilled with, have too often throughout history been relegated to that. So I would like you all to keep that in mind as I read these words. Life has always been a struggle for me. My parents were absent from my life. My mother was in and out of the criminal justice system due to her own addictions, and my father was never around. I became part of the system at age 6, being first placed in foster care. Before my 8th birthday, I suffered from sexual abuse, and by age 14, I had become a teenage mother. I was a survivor from the trauma of sexual molestation. Nevertheless, my value system for a period of my life was skewed. My childhood trauma pushed me to believe one must distrust authority, to live unconstrained by rules, and provide for oneself by any means available. During times of my mother's incarceration, I often stayed with my aunt. She would attempt to instill in me the importance of Jesus, education, and to appreciate life's little things. I graduated high school and started college, but my path was altered by my drug addiction. By the age of 19, I became entangled in the criminal justice system. After my incarceration, when I was forced to confront myself, it was my aunt's wisdom that spoke loudly in my reflective solitude. She had actually taught me to be grateful for all the little things in life. With my aunt's voice bringing renewed understanding, I went back to school, received my associate's degree, and 2 classes shy of my bachelor's degree. I've completed a host of programs and have become more involved in religious groups and church. My voice and the voice of all other incarcerated people is being choked by this unjust system. I want to be able to vote so my voice can be heard. I have spent 9 years in a system which has suppressed the voices of those of us who are in it. For me and those of us who are incarcerated, justice will never be served because we have no voice in the political process. We have no representation for us to make changes in the system in which we are currently stuck. Many of us have tried to make the most of our time here, but without voting, we are silenced by the political system. The loss of voting has taken away my voice within my family and my community. I want to have it back so I can have impact society and make my family proud.
And can I ask you to conclude, please?
Oh, that was it.
Hold on. Now, so are you in favor of this bill in its version or against it?
So I am in favor of this bill in its version, although I would, of course, as other speakers have talked about, have the inclusion and not the carve out of currently incarcerated folks.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
And who did I call next? Sir? Thank you. If I can ask you your name for the record?
Father Gerard Merrill.
Father, welcome to you, sir.
I am in favor of the passing of the bill. I think it would be fiscally responsible for this body, for the state of New Jersey, and for the nation to restore the right to vote to our citizens. If it is about 75,000 in the state of New Jersey on parole and probation, this means that perhaps half of them are going to go out and vote. Their sense of participation in the country would be enhanced, and therefore their economic productivity would be enhanced. I know mine is enhanced when I go to vote in November. I feel better about myself as a citizen. I feel better about my job. I feel better about paying my taxes. I recognize that the paying of those taxes is a part of my right.
Well, I've never heard anybody happy about paying taxes.
But I think the point is that if you are voting and you're paying your taxes, there is a link between the two. And whatever I feel about paying my taxes, I know that I had some say in who was elected and who made the decisions about those taxes. But if I'm 75,000 people and I don't have that, then I'm going to feel no kind of positivity about the money, about the taxes, about how it's used, because I don't have any say. So I think that when you're about fiscal responsibility and appropriation. So I think that by passing this bill, you enhance the energy and the willingness of people to participate as citizens. And part of participating as citizens is paying their taxes and being involved in the fiscal responsibility of the state.
Very good. Thank you, Minister. Sir, you are next. Your name for the record, please.
Thank you. My name is Christine. I'm here today on behalf of the New Jersey State Bar Association. I will try not to repeat any points. To be clear up front, to preempt your question, the State Bar Association does support the bill as written and also encourages the remediation of the carve-out that is different from A3456.
And does that conclude your presentation? Because it seems to me you got right to the point. Very unusual for an attorney.
A terrible mistake I promise to never make again. So A3456 included probation, probates, and prisoners. This current bill, A5823, is a great start, but we encourage this committee to go even further, whether today or in the future. I'm a former prosecutor, and when I was prosecuting crimes, I never thought disenfranchisement was appropriate. In fact, the State Bar Association's position is also grounded in the belief that anytime you disenfranchise any able-minded person, that's just bad for democracy. It's the slippery slope argument. If it applies to anywhere, it applies here for sure. You don't even have to look in the past. You can look at other countries now in the present. We don't have to go in the time machine. Just turn on the news. Now, just to be clear, there is also an appropriations component here, and that is for the counties and the judiciary. It takes work, it takes resources to track convictions and to de-enroll someone from the voter rolls and then to reinstate them later. They're already overwhelmed, especially in our inner cities. They could have more time to focus on serving their constituents in their courthouses. There are also some concerns and, I think, misbeliefs, big news as they call it these days, about fiscal consequences associated with these bills. I saw today an article that said that this is a significant deterrent to crime. I invite anyone on this committee to go with me to any of your local courthouses and ask anybody who's there for prosecution, to ask anybody if losing the right to vote was a deterrent. As woman Sumter had mentioned, the 3 individuals she had spoken to, I would bet that none of those people were considering losing the right to vote at the time that they committed crimes. I think it's disingenuous to claim that this is a deterrent to criminal conduct. It's simply not. And wrapping up, please. Although that there is a strong appropriations component to this, I think that the bigger focus on democracy should be the focus here for the committee, and we do applaud your efforts and the progress made here. Thank you.
Thank you to the 3 of you. Thank you very much. We'll call the next 3 up, please. I have last name Patel. I can't quite get the first name. Thank you. About Swevin Becker, last name Elijah. Elijah, here, please come on forward. Professor Penny Benders. Professor, are you here? Very good. That's going to get more challenging when we go for the 3 of you not to be repetitive.
We'll try.
I know, and first, I'm grateful for all of you for participating. And I don't mean to be, so limiting, but as this process works, committees and hearing different things. We get the theme. And by the way, although at the top, let me reiterate, when I spoke about you only do things on appropriations level, that's on bills that have been approved by previous committee. This bill has not. So you have more latitude, you just have to address the appropriations side. So, we begin. Please, and your name for the record.
Thank you. My name is Henel Patel, and I work at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice.
Miss, could you press the button on the camera just to turn on your microphone?
There you go.
There we go. Thank you. My name is Henel Patel, and I work at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. We are here to talk about this bill. We are in support with some reservations because we would also like the Assembly to include people who are currently incarcerated. I will begin my testimony. At the time of our nation's founding, New Jersey stood out for having the most expansive voting rights of all 13 states. In 1776, our state's first constitution allowed some women and free Black men to vote. Today, New Jersey stands far behind many of our sister states, despite the ideals of democracy embedded in New Jersey's first constitution at the time of its founding. Racist Southern legislatures, but we have a lot of problems with that right here, and especially through our history. New Jersey was one of the first northern states to restrict the vote to white men only. New Jersey opposed the Emancipation Proclamation, and it was the last northern state to abolish slavery. Following the Civil War, New Jersey initially rejected the 13th and 15th Amendments and rescinded its initial ratification of the 14th Amendment. It is against this racist historical backdrop that New Jersey restricted access to the ballot box by denying the vote to people with criminal convictions in 1844. This same year, it restricted voting to white men in its constitution. New Jersey's decision to maintain this practice 175 years later accomplishes the same racial exclusion that was prevalent in the middle of the 19th century. We are suppressing the vote of over 102,000 people in the state today. We appreciate that this committee and the legislature is considering passing this bill, which will restore the fundamental right to vote to people with convictions. Restoring that right to 83,000 people on parole and probation is a significant step in the right direction, and we're glad that these people will finally have a voice in our democracy. But this bill does not go far enough, leaving over 19,000 people in prison without a voice and in democracy's shadows. It leaves intact the connection between the biased justice system and the vote. New Jersey has the highest Black to white incarceration disparity rate in the country. I repeat, not any other state, no other state in the country has as high a Black to white racial disparity rate in incarceration.
Can I ask you to conclude, please?
Sorry, yes, a Black adult is 12 times more likely to be incarcerated than a white adult, which is why when this bill is passed, and we hope it is, the racial disparity actually increases significantly. Of those denied the right to vote, it will be 62% of the population. And one last thing, and I will conclude. I just want to remind everyone in the committee that we are going to have the census next year. It's an important thing. In the census, as someone mentioned earlier, We will be counting everyone in prison, but denying to determine our federal representation, but we will deny them a voice. 62% of them are Black.
Yeah, thank you. Who do I call second? I'm sorry. Please. I'm sorry. There's someone in Congress.
Just a quick clarification. 62%, what's the cohort?
Of the incarcerated population, so the people being left out of this bill.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben, sir. Thank you. I'm sorry. And your name, please, sir?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Eliza Stormbecker. I'm counsel in the Voting Rights and Elections Program at the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU School of Law. We enthusiastically support Assembly Bill 5823 and urge each of you to vote to pass this bill out of committee and move the bill to a floor vote as swiftly as possible.
That's very powerful testimony.
I thank you for the opportunity to express support for restoring voting rights. Rights restoration encourages civic participation, offers a second chance to those who have served their time, and furthers equality. It will also reduce confusion for citizens and election officials alike. I want to contextualize this policy within what's going on in the rest of the country. Although for years New Jersey has been a national leader in advancing democracy reforms and honoring the right to vote, including by passing automatic voter registration last year, New Jersey is lagging behind its neighboring states. The New Jersey's neighbors, New York, Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, and Rhode Island, have changed their felony disenfranchisement policies and relaxed them over the last 20 years. Yet New Jersey's policy is the same as the policy in Texas and in Georgia. New Jersey's disenfranchisement of people in the community speaks to more people than any other northeastern state. And the momentum for rights restoration is not just limited to blue states in the Northeast. Nevada and Colorado this year restored voting rights to people living in the community. Last November, Florida voters overwhelmingly passed Amendment 4 with 65% of the vote. That received more than 1 million more votes than the Republican candidate for governor that won office. So this is definitely a bipartisan issue. And we've seen that support for rights restoration goes beyond party politics because Americans of all political stripes believe in second chances and we believe in perfectness. 16 states, red and blue, plus Washington, D.C., have the policy that A5823 would enshrine. And the overwhelming trajectory of this country is that has been one of giving people with criminal convictions a second chance to participate in economic life. New Jersey's standstill on this issue has been a rare exception to the national movement on rights restoration.
Okay.
Across the country, voters are paying attention to issues of democracy and are getting engaged. There have been a wave of pro-voter laws enacted by state houses across the country. And earlier this year, the House of Representatives made H.R. 1, the For the People Act, the first piece of legislation that it introduced. H.R. 1 is a sweeping pro-democracy bill that includes a rights restoration policy that is consistent with A5823. In other words, a majority of the House of Representatives decided that election reform and voter. I'll just add on that point that I think we can all agree that when Washington D.C. seems to be moving faster than the New Jersey State House, something is amiss. But I will conclude by saying.
No, that's a very good point. We're going to move on out of topic next. Thank you. Doctor, you're up.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to testify.
Professor, I hope you're done.
My name is Penny Benedis. I'm a clinical professor of law at Rutgers, where I've taught for nearly 30 years. I specialize in constitutional law and international human rights law. I'm also the director of the Human Rights Clinic and was the co-director of the Constitutional Litigation Clinic until 2013, and Hamil Patel was one of my students. Relevant to these proceedings, I have devoted a significant amount of time over the past 2 decades to trying to restore voting rights to New Jerseyans who have been deprived of the franchise because they have felony convictions. My testimony today is actually different from everyone else's. It focuses on the sizable body of international law that supports full enfranchisement of all people who have been stripped of their right to vote as a penalty for having committed crimes. As such, I fully support A5823. I also urge the Assembly, however, to see this bill as a mere first step in completely eliminating felony disenfranchisement in the state of New Jersey. Only full restoration of voting rights to all persons who committed crimes including those who are incarcerated, will bring New Jersey into compliance with international law that the United States and New Jersey are required to follow and enforce. So much has been written about police departments targeting people of color and how as a result, the United States criminal justice system disproportionately arrests, convicts, and incarcerates people of color. Indeed, former Attorney General John Farmer convened a commission that issued a blue ribbon report that found that New Jersey State Police engaged in racial profiling in stopping cars on our roads and highways. It is that racial profiling that spawned the unfortunate phrase, quote unquote, driving while black. For those not in the know, that term means that African American drivers could be randomly pulled over by the police for questioning simply because of the color of their skin. Those illegal stops result in a disproportionate number of black and brown citizens being illegally arrested, convicted, and incarcerated. As the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit aptly stated in 2010, and I quote, "Before one who commits a criminal act becomes a felon, numerous other decisions must be made by state actors. Police departments decide where to spend their resources. Officers..."
Professor, I need you to conclude.
Okay, no, finish that. So, I want to finish my quote and then I want to talk about international.
There's some time to devote, because, and frankly, we're probably going to have to now curtail testimony because of the lateness of the day and the bounce of the weekend.
Okay, so
I need to.
I want to talk about international law. International law, which is, okay.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We have to move on. If not, we're not gonna.
I know, just one sentence. Okay, the bill is terrific. International law is clear that you can't disenfranchise someone simply for committing a crime. Various human rights groups have come to the U.S. and have issued reports finding that the disenfranchisement in New Jersey and elsewhere violates international law and have urged the U.S. to take steps to end it. And I'm so glad that the committee is considering this bill as a first step to ending this violation of international law.
We're trying to get to a point to vote on.
Thank you.
Now, I'm going to ask a considerable indulgence. We have a considerable set of people that are in favor. This committee would like to vote on this bill. We have the latest of the day. We have other bills we have to hear. So we're going to stop taking testimony. We're going to vote on the bill. Those that have signed slips that are in favor and wanted to testify, I apologize to all of them. I suspect the outcome today is going to be something you're going to be pleased with. So we ask for your written testimony to submit, please, for the public record and reflected. Your names are going to be in the public record as being in support of this bill, as you follow the paper. So I thank all of you for consideration. That being said, the chair will entertain a motion to release the bill. So moved. Moved by Assemblyman Tucker, second by Assemblyman Conway. Roll call, please. We are voting on A5823.
On the motion to record Assembly Bill 5823, Mr. Masso?
No.
Mr. Rooney has left the vote in the negative. Mr. Wertz?
I will be no on this bill. It's interesting what Assemblyman Chair said, and I agree with his comments. I don't know what the context was trying to be, but that this is part of the sentence. There has to be, this is a penalty. Whether you're on probation or parole, it's part of your criminal sentence. And it's not, you wouldn't be on parole if you weren't incarcerated for a serious crime. I would be no on this.
Ms. Munoz? Ms. Tucker?
Yes.
Ms. Kindermeyer?
Yes.
Ms. Mosquera?
Yes.
Mr. D'Angelo has left the vote in the affirmative. Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Scher has left the vote in the affirmative. Mr. Chairman?
Yes, bill is released.